Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. I think this is a beautiful time of the year. We're in transition. The last of the winter flower is just holding on. Look at that up there. That's Cornus Mas, just still flowering. And then next to it, Amelanchier. He's bursting into life. I don't tend to cut any of my herbaceous perennials back in the garden unless they get really frosted and go mushy. If not, I leave them. They provide great structure and form for the garden through the winter months. On top of that, they're superb habitat and food for wildlife. And this is Euphorbia schillingii. Look at it. You can see it's really good form and it's just starting to come out of the ground here. So what I'm doing now is I'm just cutting those old shoots hard back, and in a few weeks' time, that'll really be rocking and rolling. Coming up on today's programme, Joe finds out how one garden designer turned two tricky plots into an exciting, cohesive space.
The key to this garden is getting rid of that awkward shape, and Nick has done it by creating large beds, so the awkward shape boundaries are lost.
We meet a grower with a love for all plants, but with a particular passion for Astrantias.
We do grow 120 different Astrantias. I just love looking at them in close-up.
We join Rekha, who proves, if proof be needed, that she really does know her onions.
I've got about 10 varieties growing right now, but I tend to find the rarer it is, the more I get engrossed with it, and I need to have that seed.
And I will be planting some potatoes and giving my lawn a radical facelift. Would you believe I have been in this garden now for just over 12 months. But in reality, I think it's taken me that long to get my head around the space. I think I got to the point of coming out and feeling like I could see too much of the garden. Everything felt too open and I wanted to break it up. And the only way I was going to do that was add more structural planting. So I've gone to town on trees. They add so much to the garden. But all the trees in here are not only quite small, I can prune them back, I could lift the canopy, I could shape them. And I've peppered them through the space. I've started over there, we've got a lovely salix. Here, Euonymus, which is a spindle tree. And that lovely magnolia. That'll fill that void. And then behind me, I've put in a Malus Everest, beautiful flower and fruit. So when it comes to planting, I do tend to build my gardens very much in layers. So trees, shrubs, herbaceous perennial, and then the bulbs. So those trees have gone through, and now we're on the shrubs. And what I've decided through here is they're all going to be species roses. A lot of people think, yeah, but they only flower once. But I get fantastic hips that come later on in the year. That is a bare root rose. This just arrived in the post a couple of days ago. I've soaked it for 24 hours. Great thing about bare root is you can choose from a large variety of roses. Also, this saves you a few quid. There is a season between November right through probably the end of April. So the rose I've chosen is Rosa Hebe's Lip. Single flower, creamy white with a red tip. That flower also provides superb scent. So what I want to do is dig a really nice big hole because I want to be able to spread these roots out. Would you believe that I have mulched this garden over the last 12 months 3 times? So I'm not going to add anything else. You might find that if you're planting into a new garden, maybe on a new estate, you've got poor soil, a bit of well-rotted manure, and mycorrhizal fungi will be a really good idea. Just going to go a little bit deeper. Again, the other thing, there's lots of conversations in horticulture about how deep do we plant roses. You see where the graft is here? Whether that should be below the ground or above the ground. I put it at ground level. And now as I'm pushing the soil in, what I want, this is nice and fine, this soil. So if your soil's a little bit sort of claggy, you know, big lumps, break it up. Because what you want is really good contact with this root system. Let's just give that a final firm around. So all I've got to do now is give that a really good watering in. I am really loving putting this garden together. And we all know that designing a garden doesn't come without its challenges. And Joe went to visit one last summer that's definitely got more than its fair share.
As a garden designer, I see a huge range of outdoor spaces, and awkward and unusual plots are the most challenging, but also the most interesting to design. Now, here in Surrey, there's a mother and son with 2 adjoining gardens. Unfortunately, the son is a garden designer and has brought all these disparate areas together in a contemporary and harmonious way.
Designer Nick Howard created the master plan for the gardens, which are just over 1/4 acre. Nick's plot is mainly at the front of his house and has a number of interesting spaces with simple planting and his design studio. There's a small shady courtyard to the rear with a fabulous Victorian wall and immersive planting. Nick's house backs onto the side of his mum's, and he's created a seamless link with a gate so you can walk through into hers. This space feels more open, but everywhere you look there are fabulous plant combinations and vistas. Although the plots are quite irregular, there's a relaxed flow between the spaces which has been achieved through clever design.
So did you have a master plan for the whole garden, or did it just grow organically?
For the kind of layout of the paving, there was definitely kind of a plan, and it was keeping it square with the house, just give it a sense kind of symmetry. The boundary walls of the garden are at 45 degrees to the house. So you've basically got this kind of triangular shape. So the design is set square with the house, which then results in basically these diamond-shaped borders, which project into the space. The way that the deck goes out from the house and then links with the back, they were really awkward kind of junctions. So a really careful use of how the materials joined, just gave that kind of cleanness to the space. And then all those kind of awkward corners are planting. So it's all softened. And, you know, yes, it might be very rectilinear with corners and everything, but actually then your plants create that very natural line and that softness to give you that flow. But you've got the structure underneath. I like curvaceous design, but it's very much an intended wave of line rather than, you know, wiggle. You know.
Yeah. You've got lots of dark boundaries here, dark greys and the brick wall behind you, and black as well. Why do you use those?
Using the colour is a way of really manipulating the space, and actually the dark on the buildings, because there's a lot of buildings here, that architecture would have completely dominated the space. So actually by just blanking it out, it becomes the most recessive point, and then the greenery looks amazing against it. It's a really clever trick. It's not about the black fence, it's about it disappearing. That's what they're meant to do, they just disappeared.
There's some really fab shrubs in this garden. This is one of my favourite shrubs for autumn colour, Euonymus alatus. Just turning, it's going to go an intense red. Fantastic. And then there's this, Magnolia macrophylla. But the key to this garden is getting rid of that awkward shape. And Nick has done it by creating large beds. This is 2 metres deep, cutting into the garden, square on with the house. So the awkward shape boundaries are lost and the plants envelop you. And over there is one of my favourite shrubs. That's Heptacodium. It looks spectacular, multi-stemmed, it's in full flower at the moment. The bees are loving it. And again, it's about volume in a small space that makes it work so well. Now, Nick said that when people see this bright pink wall, they don't quite know how to react. A lot of them smile, it's a bit of fun, and it works really well because it introduces permanent colour into this space. Paints also intensify the colours around them. These greens, it picks up on the texture, that flat plane of colour plays with the texture of the bamboo behind, but also intensifies the green of it at the same time. And it's not just this that's pink in the garden, it's being picked up in other elements, and that just filters nicely through the whole space. It's bold, but it's very effective. Ah, the Great British Lawn. It's even got stripes on it, this one. But a rectangle's a bit dull, isn't it? So I love what Nick's done here. He's just placed 3 clipped hornbeam domes into this. It's broken up the lawn. It's connected with the landscape beyond because the shapes of these domes work really nicely with the trees in the borrowed landscape. And also these will reflect the seasons. They're just turning their lovely bronzy autumnal hues now. A lovely simple rhythm. They just work so well.
The furniture and ornaments in this garden introduce plenty of personality and in some cases a quirky focal point. Placing is key to success. It's easy to buy something and just plonk it on the ground, but here Nick's brought many of them up closer to eye level by hanging them on a wall or placing them on a plinth or a table.
Nick has designed a fabulous garden here, or should I say series of gardens, because in effect he's taken an awkward space and turned it into rooms. And each of those garden rooms has its own personality through the hard landscaping and the plants that he's put into it. And he's obviously a massive plant lover. But the ornamentation, the compositions, the combinations of plants all layer up to create a really fantastic space. It's quality.
I thought that bird's eye view was fascinating. You could really understand how the hard landscaping worked with the buildings, but then the soft planting just sort of tied everything together. And talking about hard landscaping, that's what we've been doing in the front over the winter. The beds are now in around the house, but my favourite detail, it's got to be these. It's my little picking paths. So instead of having one large area now, I've got 6 individual beds. And what I want to do this year is I want to grow more variety but less numbers. And today I was hoping to get the potatoes in, my first earlies, but that soil still feels really cold. I'm not going to let that stop me though. I have a plan. I can still get things going. Look at these little beauties. I still get slightly excited this time of year when we can start to get the potatoes going. It really kicks things off for me. But as easy as they are to grow, it's good to understand that they fall into 3 main groups. So you've got your first earlies, your second earlies, and then your main crop. For me, the easiest way to understand it is my first earlies. They go in at the end of March, but I think about those as my new potatoes. And then my second earlies, 3 or 4 weeks later, but that in my head is my salad potatoes. And then 3 or 4 weeks after that, your main crop goes in, and that's my good roasties for my Christmas dinner. So what I did about 3-4 weeks ago is I started to chit these, which means you buy yourself seed potatoes and then put them on a warm windowsill till you get these dark shoots. So once you've got them to that stage, it's time to plant them. So I told you I had a plan because I can't get them in the ground because, as I said, it's too cold at the minute. I'm going to get them in pots. You could do it in a bag. Just make sure you have some drainage holes if you're going to do that. So what I'm doing is putting about 10-15 centimetres of peat-free compost in the bottom of here. What I'm going to do now is press that into the compost with the shoots pointing upwards and just bury it over. And in a pot this size, 3 is ample. So once they're in and covered, I'll put that somewhere sheltered, which means I can protect it from any of the late frosts. I'll give it a water, and then over the next few weeks, the shoots will start to push through the surface. As they start to push through, I'm going to let them get to about 10 centimetres, 12 centimetres at most, and then, because I've started it so low, I've got room to earth them up. So I'll start adding compost, and I will actually bury that foliage so it just sticks out the surface again. What that does is that stops the light getting to the potatoes, which means my potatoes won't go green, which means I'll be having to use them. Now, it's time for one of your films, and we're off to Belfast.
Hello, I'm Beverly.
And I'm Martin. Welcome to our garden. So the garden is northeast facing. It's a sandy bank, just under 1/3 of an acre. Okay, so these are what I like to refer to as my Irish tree ferns, Dicksonia hibernica, which they're actually just ordinary ferns growing in steam pipes. But from a distance, they don't look too bad. This is one of our own Polyanthus crosses. It's a very unusual petal shape. Our emperor penguins are now 9 years old. They need a haircut too.
Thank you for visiting our garden. 30 years in the making. Don't forget to say hello to the dragon on your way home.
Martin, Beverly, I love that idea with the tree ferns. It really made me smile. I think that's one of the wonderful things about your films you make and send in to us, full of ideas and tips. And then on that note, please keep sending them. All the information's on our website as to how to do it and where to send them. So actually now, what I'm doing is just coming and tidying through the gravel garden. Actually, in all honesty, I'm also looking for plants. You might remember, I took a bit of a gamble with things that weren't necessarily going to make it through the winter. I put some succulents through here, on top of that ginger lily as well, and I definitely can't see a succulent anywhere. I think they're gone. But the ginger lily, I'm just going to give it a little bit of time. And a lot of us will think we've lost stuff, and we might have done. But don't be in a rush to pull things out. Give them a bit of time. You might find that there's life under the ground that will start to shoot. But what also came out of last year was coming up here with a cup of tea on a particularly cold day and realised the wind really whips across this garden. So these plants were getting a real battering. So what I've done is I've put a little hedge along there. I'm going to let that grow till about 2 foot. I'm hoping what that will do is filter the worst of the wind and just lift the temperature. And on top of that, I added some structure planting. So that's a Calycanthus, which in the summer has got this wonderful, deep crimson, open flower. Now, we're off to Nottinghamshire to meet a grower who definitely has developed a passion for one group of plants.
Astrantias are quite a primitive plant, so they evolved many millions of years ago. The Latin name, Astrantia, means starry. I just love looking at them in close-up. Many common names for the Astrantias, masterwort being one of them, but the one I really like is Hattie's pincushion. My name's Dr. Andrew Ward, and I hold the National Collection of Astrantias. I did a PhD in plant breeding and genetics. We'd always thought, my wife Helen and I, that we would have a nursery when we retired. And in the end, we just brought retirement forward 40 years. When we arrived, it was 2 acres, heavy clay soil, but it hadn't been looked after, so it was nettles and brambles up to around about 4 or 5 feet in height. We were walking up and amongst all this wilderness, and our next door neighbour called us over and he said, "You know, you'll never grow anything on that land, don't you?" And I thought, what on earth have we done? Now, looking at the garden, it's impossible to think back to those early days. It's just amazing what nature can do. We'd always loved Astrantias. They are so amenable in a garden setting, and especially with us being on the heavy clay soil, they like to have a little bit of moisture underneath. This is Astrantia Roma, and it's one of my favourite Astrantias. Out in the sunshine, the flowers have their typical pink coloration. But we've got it underneath the magnificent leaf of Tetrapanax. And there, that extra shade means that the flower colour just fades away. So it almost looks like you've got 2 separate plants in one. Nobody should have just one Astrantia. They should have at least 3. So you'd have a silvery white one, a pink one and a red one, because there is some place in the garden that they will grow. Astrantias are members of the carrot family, Apiaceae. And here we've got 2 of those members together. Astrantia Bright and Breezy, another one of my absolute favourites, and then Pimpinella Major Rosea. Lots of small flowers clustered together, as in the Astrantias here, but in this case you also have that bract around the outside, which is providing additional colour and attracting the insects in. When you go to florists these days, you're seeing more and more Astrantias being sold as quite an expensive cut flower. And they last well in water, and they provide interesting colours, and they are showy. They do have one drawback, however. They have that scent of catwee, which you wouldn't necessarily want in your bridal bouquet, etc. Astrantias are very promiscuous. They will hybridise if you've got a white one and a red one in your garden. Very often you'll get pinks, whites and reds appearing. The seeds will be formed within the parent and they will drop down into the centre, germinate, and a couple of years later you will get those new colours appearing. Often these offspring are much stronger growing than the original plant, and they will actually kill it, causing fratricide. And people think that the original plant has mutated into this completely different colour. That's not the case. It's just been murdered. These were taken from just one flower head from Astrantia Burgundy Manor. You can see the variation. This one's almost like the parent, from the dark burgundy, paling slightly, the pinks, and almost pure white. And this can be a real problem in the garden with a national collection, because you can get contamination with these seedlings, and so you have to be absolutely ruthless and eradicate them. Astrantias are particularly good in a shady part of the garden. In the spring, you get that flush of colour from other plants, and then as you move further through the year, the colour starts to fade away into your greens. So to have those little pops of silvery limes, pinks and the reds is so important. And many of these Astrantias, especially if they're cut down round about July, August time to give them a little bit of a rest and refresh, will then flower again in September, October, and some varieties are still in flower first, second week of November. Astrantia Midnight Owl. It's not one of the most floriferous varieties, but you get this almost unique colour combination. The tips of each of these bracts picked out almost in black, it's such a dark burgundy, and then quickly going through to a silvery green, and then beneath that, pink. We do grow 120 different Astrantias, but that is not just the focus of the garden. It's just one aspect of the plants that we grow here. I think if you just grew Astrantias, that would be terribly boring. There's so many different plants out there. You need as much variety as in life. And I'm sure the world would be a much nicer place if more people gardened.
Andrew, I totally agree with you. I think the world would be a better place if everybody gardened. And I love an Astrantia. They're a bit of a go-to for me. But interesting when you were talking about the conditions that they love. Down closer to the house, no more than about 4 metres away, I had a lovely group of white Astrantias, slightly in shade, in a damper spot, that flowered their heart out. Up here, slightly more free draining in hotter conditions. This red one really struggled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig this up, divide it and move it back closer to the house. It's a great time of year to lift herbaceous plants, divide them up, pot them, move them around. So that's a really nice group. So all I'm going to do is just put a couple of forks in here and just slowly, like that, push back together and tease apart. I mean, if you wanted to, in reality, you could make probably about another 5 plants out of that, but I think that'll make a nice clump. Put that in. And then I think what I'm left with, I'm actually gonna containerise those and then maybe move those somewhere else in the garden. But this little group here can go down here. When it comes to placing these out, probably just going to have about 30 centimetres between them. Maybe later on in the year we can come back to this and see if it's worked. There you go. All they need now is a drop of water and job done. Still to come on today's programme. Rekha proves she knows her onions and shares an ambitious trial.
It wouldn't be Rekha's allotment if I wasn't doing something extraordinary or weird or wonderful. These two are my cotton plants.
And we check out a garden where the plants compete for attention with the containers.
Welcome to my laundry area. This is a 1920s washing machine that I planted with white bacopa to make it look like soap suds.
But first, we have another one of your films, and we're off to meet a man who's created a garden very much with wildlife in mind.
Hello, my name's David Harmston. I live here in rural Lincolnshire with my wife Debbie. We've been gardening here since 2009, and this just used to be a grass paddock, and we've converted it into more of a wildlife-friendly garden. I think there are 3 important things for wildlife gardening. I call these my 3 W's. The first W is water. This is a shallow, clay-lined pond, about 2 foot deep, and yeah, there's all sorts here: frogs, toads, newts. The second W is wilderness. Now, I call this my meadow in the making. I'm employing a little fella down here, which I've got established, to help me sort out the grass. And that's yellow rattle. It forms an association with the roots of the grass, and it steals the nutrients from the grass, literally making the grass weaker. So we could do with a bit more of this here because the grass is too strong. The third W in my wildlife garden are wow flowers. Now, this is Phacelia. Just look at that. It's absolutely gorgeous, and the bees love it. I hope you've enjoyed looking around our wildlife garden. Thanks for watching.
David, the biodiversity that you must have created in that garden must be incredible. And in reality, that is one thing that my garden is lacking. Yeah, we get wildlife and it comes and goes, but it could be a whole lot better. So I've decided we're going to go for an unkept lawn. What I want to do is introduce a mix of wildflower and grass in the middle. So if you look, what I've done to make it look slightly kept is I've just put a border of turf all the way around. You imagine I can come out, I can mow this bit, then the wildflower and the mixed grass is in the middle. You've got this lovely break, and then you've got your ornamental border. So if I tell you what I've done here already, I took off all the existing turf and then I've rotivated the whole area. I still think that actually the soil is probably slightly too good for wildflower. So what I've done in the central area is I've added some horticultural sand, and I'm hoping that that will just take the nutrient level down a little bit, because what I'm just about to put on top is not going to need a lot in the way of nutrients. And because it is a smaller area, I have gone to town and got myself some turf. So there's a mix of different grasses in here, and then a whole load of wildflower. Things like chamomile, we've got yarrow, different clovers. So what you want to do is pull that back in nice and tight. You want these joints to really sort of be worked in together. Interesting, you start to look online, you'll see there's loads of specialist turf suppliers that do a mix of wildflower by itself and then a mix of grass and wildflower. What I want here is a really good, clean, straight edge. So I'm just going to get that board underneath, nice sharp knife, and work your way along that board. And you'll get a lovely clean cut. And now we just pull that back in, and then that will work down really nicely. And then the last thing you want to do is get the back of the rake and then just tamp it in so everything's nice and tight. This is exactly the same process if you just want to relay turf in your garden in general. So what you should never do is walk on the turf while you're laying. So what I'm going to do now with the next turf is I'm going to start the end that I've just finished. If you imagine I'm trying to create a brickwork pattern. By doing that, you're not going to end up with long lines. Oh, look. Hello, young man. Stay off the lawn, stay on the boards. Yes, Dad. Go on, good boy. This doesn't have to Cost a fortune if you want to do a bigger area. You could just plug plant into an existing lawn. You could just start with seed from nothing. And it is a good time of year to do that. So there you go. One nicely framed, unkept lawn. Hopefully we'll get a fair drop of rain. If we don't, I will have to just keep it watered, but that really will be minimal. And all I'll do is I'll come out every few days and literally just give it a little tug, and you'll soon know that it's rooted in. Until that point, I'm going to stay off it, and that might be 3 or 4 weeks. We're now off to London to meet Rekha, who's been on her allotment experimenting with onions.
Tying onions is one of my favourite jobs. I'm a self-confessed onion fan, and now in August, my shed is packed with different varieties of onions and shallots. As a result, I've learned a lot about how they grow best in my soil. And all this harvest started way back in spring as little seedlings. My first big discovery was that on my allotment, onion seeds and seedlings are key. I grow all my onions from seed because sets have never worked for me. It's something I've tried and tried, and once I tried with seeds, it seemed to be the best thing ever. I've got about 10 varieties going right now. I think about 10. I need to count again. But I tend to find the rarer it is, the more I get engrossed with it, and I need to have that seed. Onion seeds have a reputation for being difficult to grow, but I scatter them in a tray in February and let them fly. And I plant them in groups. I tend to grow 3 or 4 at the same time. It's because I don't want large onions. I find large onions, I'll use half of it and then I'll have to put the other half in the fridge. By growing smaller onions, I get to use one, and that's job done. Of course, if you want big onions, grow them singly. For whatever grouping, I am very keen on spacing. With my ruler, although it's a bordered a bit when I do measure up, but remember these things grow bigger, so by making the space much wider, I'll be able to hoe later on. This is Bedfordshire Champion, which really is a champion for me. It keeps well and has a very strong taste. Each group are firmed in and tugged. I tend to do a little wobble, is what we tend to call a technical term here now. By firming them in, I know I'm making sure that they are going to stay where they are and they're not going to rock in a month's time. I think it helps stop them bolting too. And then they get a little bit of watering. When I found out that there's a reason why you don't water onions too much, so that you get a spicier onion, when that came about, I thought that was like a eureka moment for me. Just water less so that they get stronger and stronger in flavour. Then I don't even need to water so much. Shallots work similarly. I pop 4 or 5 in a group to keep them small. As an onion fan, I have lots of varieties, but most are white, as red ones like Red Creole don't grow well. Rose de Roscoff, though, is pink, so I'm taking a chance. Around the rest of my plot, there are, as always, experiments going on. It wouldn't be Rekha's allotment if I wasn't doing something extraordinary or weird or wonderful. These two are my cotton plants. Black cotton, Egyptian fine. I don't know if I'll make a pillowcase, but maybe I'll try and make a handkerchief. By July, in the midst of a hot, dry summer, the allotment is burgeoning. Onions take 12 weeks to make good bulbs, and the main crops are growing really well, with only red Creole having the usual sulk. Some seedlings I planted early, and those onions are ready to come out, because onions and shallots are biennials. They bulb up in the first year, and they'll sprout in the next year. But the way to know that they are ready for hibernating is when the stems flop over. But that also means they're ready for harvest, and that's what I'm going to do now. I lift them with a fork so as not to damage the base of the onion. It is at this point that pest and disease can get in if they're stressed out, and just be gentle at this stage. Once they've dried out, they'll be fine. Using recycled shells from a plastic greenhouse, my onions take about 3 weeks to dry out, and then I can start tying them. To string up the onions, I make sure that the onion is dry but not too crispy so that it can wrap around the string. I start with a long loop of string hung over a peg and weave the stem in a figure of 8 through the loop. Then add the next onion above. As well as being lovely to do, there's good reasons for stringing onions. It tightens the neck where the bulb meets the leaves, and that stops any disease getting in. And the weight of the onions, as they pull down further, it tightens them and they'll last even longer. And that's the joy of hanging onions. I'm really pleased with the onion harvest. The Spanish white is mild and great for salads. The shallot is long red Florence and fantastic for Italian cooking. Red Creole was disappointing, but I won't give up on reds. Rose de Roscoff is beautiful and really juicy. And out in the greenhouse is a real cotton triumph. This is my cotton plant. The red one or the black one didn't make it, but this Egyptian cotton has. And I am just amazed that it's actually grown. And only today have I noticed that the flowers are now turning into a fruit. Cotton in UK, please, come on, tell me, is that not wonderful? Onions have done really well. They've been a good achievement for me, but I think cotton has been a colossal achievement. I'm really pleased.
Rebecca, I thought when you started growing cotton, you were pushing your luck a little bit, and then you got it to flower, and then you send us some photographs when you've actually produced cotton. But what I'm really looking forward to is the hanky. Brilliant. Look at those beautiful little seedlings. I love plants that sell seed. I let them do their business, and then I go in and I edit. I think that nature knows what it's doing. Plants will tell you where they want to grow, and it's a great way of making your garden look quite natural quickly. And this is actually Sweet Cicely, so an umbellifer that gets to about 600 mil, 2 foot, flowers mid to late May. Then when it goes over the seed head over the season, you end up with these beautiful black seed heads that carry you into the winter. And if you look carefully, I've let it just thread its way through the back here. But I can also move these to another part of the garden. And I want to move them to the front because not only does this look beautiful, but it works in the kitchen as well. It's actually a superb plant for sweetening rhubarb, so you don't actually need sugar. So what I'm going to do is lift a patch of these. I'm going to containerise them, so I'm going to pot them up and then grow them on, and then plant them out in the garden later on in the year. But look closely, they don't actually look like the parent plant. They're what we call the cotyledons, so they're first leaves. I call them the baby leaves. So if you have got something self-seeding in your garden, it doesn't necessarily look like the parent plant. Just give it a little bit of time. If you look closely, you can just start to see on some of them the first true leaves. Now it's time for another one of your films, and we're off to meet somebody that definitely has the same passion as me when it comes to those self-seeders. It's Sue Passmore, and she's from Ceredigion.
Welcome to my garden in West Wales. There was nothing here when I came here 20 years ago, just a sort of small town back garden with a central path and curb edge beds. But as you will see, I've tried to create something quite different. This path is full of euphorbia and oxalis. I do encourage self-seeders, and they are simply marvellous at doing their own thing. And the Spanish bells come back year after year. They grow here among the hardy geraniums, and they're good self-seeders too. My aim was to make a garden that would be good all the year round, and also very good for wildlife. You may think that I tend to grow weeds like valerian, but they are absolutely wonderful for the hummingbird hawkmoth. Thank you for visiting my garden. I hope that you've enjoyed it.
Sue, I thought your garden was stunning. Also, you know, I've got another name for those self-seeders. I call them fairy dusts, because I think they bring just a bit of magic to the garden. I've potted up my sweet Cicely. Another way of getting free plants, or very cheap ones, is growing from seed. So these are plants I collected last year, the Digitalis lutea, which is a perennial foxglove. Grows to just shy of 1 metre. Beautiful sort of small, creamy yellow flowers. So when it comes to the sowing, I've got seed compost, and I'm just going to fill my tray, probably about 90% there. Do that. Now I'm going to give it a tap, good tap down, take off any lumps. So now I'm going to finish off by using the sieve. So now I've got a really fine surface to sow into, but before I do that, we're going to give them a watering, because when you see the size of these seeds, you'll realise if you watered afterwards, they would probably all end up in one corner. Right, this is a little tip. Rather than just trying to sow the seeds straight away from your hand, get a piece of paper and just start to decant them into the paper. And now what I'm going to do is just gently fold that back in and just work my way across. And because they are a small seed, they are prone to drying out, but these seeds actually need light to germinate. So what I'm going to do is cover with some vermiculite. Just give this a really fine covering. It will hold in the moisture, but it will let the light get into those seeds. So all I've got to do now is get those labelled up. They'll go in the greenhouse. What I'll do is let them get up to a couple of leaves, and then I'll prick them out, grow them on. Come September, going into October, I'll be able to introduce these into the garden. I don't think in all the years that I've been gardening, there's still anything as satisfying as watching those little seedlings break that surface and enter the world. And on that note, BBC Radio 2 and BBC Children's and Education have come together to start a campaign, and it's called Let It Grow. And it's all about getting out there and having a go. So if you're interested, all the information is on our website. Go on, you know you want to. Now we're off to Horsham in West Sussex to meet a couple that have a keen eye for recycling.
I really love the garden. It's a lovely place to be. It's nearly always full of colour and insects and birds. And we spend all our time out here, either sitting and looking at it or working on it. I'm Terry Lefebvre. I live here at Foxglove Cottage with my husband Peter, and we share a passion of going to car boots and antique fairs to pick up all our research. To my laundry area. This is a 1920s washing machine that I planted with white bacopa to make it look like soap suds. And when I saw the boiler, I thought, oh, I've got to have that to go with the washing machine. And that's planted with white verbena. So I think the area will probably be expanded further as laundry items become available. So this is an old shop display unit that we've covered with bike wheels, and the clematis are climbing up it. And then the hanging basket is an old poultry feeder. I want to find some more of these because they're just the right size. I like planting them, they look good, but they're not very easy to come by, and I'm still looking. Peter doesn't do much gardening. He doesn't know much about plants, but he does all the DIY and the upcycling jobs. And he's very good at moving bags of compost. Later in the year, when some perennials die down, I fill the gaps with plants that are, well, mainly salvias, that I've grown on in big containers. And I paint the pots with just a muted green fence paint, and you just don't notice them. They disappear into the foliage. Definitely my favourite plants are salvias because they flower for such a long time and they're such bright colours. This is one of my favourites, Salvia mulberry jam. Sat in an old upcycled chair. Has such a lovely bright flower, and even when the petals drop, you're left with the dark red calyx, and that gives an even longer season of interest. It's not 100% hardy, so I have to take it into the greenhouse for the winter, and I pot it on each year into a bigger pot. I grow the salvias in pots because they're easy to water and feed. I feed them maybe 3 times a year with slow release feed. This is one of my newest ones, Salvia Lake Ladoga. It's a lovely pale mauve and big flowers. And then next to it is Salvia Rockin' Purple. It's very like Amistad. It's not quite so tall, and it has lovely dark stems and, again, the dark calyx after the petals fall. I sow quite a bit from seed, perennials and annuals. It's dreadful when all the seed catalogues come in the autumn. Every year I say, I'm not going to do this next year. And every year I do. I'll only want maybe one perennial, but you've got to sow the packet because they might not germinate. And then you've got 29 others. You could stock a garden quite cheaply by growing things from seed and learning how to propagate from cuttings. It's not difficult. It's easy. Give it a go.
Terry, Peter, I think you're right. Give it a go, definitely. I think upcycling, recycling is a really easy way to personalise your garden. It's cheap or even free, and what's not to love about that? Would you believe these have both been recycled, really? The chairs a friend was throwing away, admittedly, they didn't look great, and the table I just found at an old sale. Took them home, painted them up, cleaned them up, and this was a lovely little job. But if you don't fancy that, here are a few things you could be doing in the garden at the weekend. If the supermarket shortages have got you worried, then getting some tomato plants going should be at the top of your list. I like to start mine off in a seed tray filled with peat-free compost, which I water and then allow to drain. Sprinkle the seed over the surface and lightly cover with more compost. Keep somewhere warm and light and they'll be up in a matter of days. To help replace some of the nutrients that have been washed away over the winter, it's worth giving your trees and your shrubs a feed. I'm scattering an organic general purpose fertiliser over my borders, which should give them everything they need over the coming months. Nothing could be easier than growing your own soft fruit. And now is a good time to get your plants in the ground. I'm planting a blackcurrant called Big Ben, which has large, juicy berries. Whichever type you go for, tease out the roots, firm in well, and give it a good drink. Isn't it lovely to be out in the garden with some warmth in the sun? Things are coming alive all around us. But I'm afraid that is it from us, Ash and myself. But Monty will be back next week at Longmeadow, BBC 2, 8 o'clock on Friday. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Bye-bye.